This is the Vapes4Vets podcast brought to you by Namaste Technologies. My name is Jesse. I'm with today Janine Sagert. How are you doing today, Janine?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
No, I'm happy to talk about myself. um, in a nutshell, I basically um, am trained. I have a doctorate in clinical psychology and anthropology. So, looking at how cultures and individuals' mental health interact. So, my career has spanned 40 years, uh, teaching stress management, mostly executive coaching, but also altered states of consciousness. And my interest in this movie came about through a personal experience in my early 20s with a psychedelic that had a profound effect on my consciousness and intelligence and literally shaped the trajectory of my career and my interests.
And this movie is called From Shock to Awe.
The movie is called From Shock to Awe. It's so the subtitle now is Healing PTSD with Ayahuasca, MDMA, and cannabis. MDMA, of course, being also known on the streets as ecstasy, but the clinical pure version is labeled MDMA. And we've been following veterans closely, intimately, for over 3 years to tell the story of PTSD, what it looks like, how these veterans have turned to alternatives other than pharmaceuticals for healing to great benefit. And it has been an amazing journey and a transformative one for them and for us.
And you've introduced me to a couple of the veterans in your movie, Ian Benoit and Matt Cale.
Yes, actually, Ian is not in our movie. Matt Cale is. The other one is Mike Cooley. And their wives, by the way, because we look at the effect of PTSD on families and also the healing effect on the families. So it's very in depth, it's very much story centered. It's not about experts talking about these substances, the viewer gets to watch what goes on over time for the veterans using these substances. And if I do say so myself, it's very heartfelt and moving.
Are you currently still filming, or where are you at with the movie right now?
We are in almost final cut. We have one more scene to do, a follow-up of a year and a half with the two vets and their wives. We'll be going, they're both families are from Colorado Springs in Colorado, and we'll be going there in July to do our final shoot. But the movie is 99% in the can and moving along very nicely, if I do say so, aiming for a fall 2017 release.
Where will people be able to watch it?
We aren't sure yet. That I often say this film is a little bit like having a child, and it's about to graduate from college, and it's getting some whiffs of job offers, but we don't know exactly where it's going to land. So there's so many phases to making a film that you do want. I mean, there's many things still to do, all the technical things and adding music, et cetera, to get it to its final form. And pretty soon we'll be looking at entering it into film festivals, finding a distributor, finding a broadcaster. By the way, the director of the film, who's the true filmmaker, I am a content producer and co-maker of it. I'm like the mother. But Luc Cote is from Montreal and is the true filmmaker. He's made over 40 films already. So it's a very high quality cinematic experience.
Well, we'd love to keep people posted on when it's coming out and where they'd be able to see it.
Yeah.
Sounds like a
Well,
very interesting movie.
It well, we think so. We'll put it that way. By the way, you and anybody else who's interested, if you want to keep up to date with what's happening with it, put yourself on our mailing list on our website from shocktoawe.com. It if you put your name on the mailing list, we put out newsletters every quarter, and it will give you the trajectory of the film, what's happening.
I know I'm already a newsletter holder, so anyone listening, that's how you'd be able to find out where this is going to air and where you'll be able to watch it. So during the filming of this movie, you've worked with a lot of veterans with PTSD. Did you have any experience prior to the movie with people with PTSD?
Not veterans, although Luc Cote, the director, already made a movie called Crash Landing on Canadian vets with PTSD. It came out in 2005, and there was very little hope for them. It was the vets with PTSD, not that much was being talked about at that time. They were marginalized, not given much help, and there wasn't much hope for therapy. Now, with these psychedelics and cannabis, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and that's what prompted him to want to make another movie about this. But although I haven't had experience with vets with PTSD, as a psychologist, I've seen people certainly with severe trauma and know how deep stress and helplessness affect a consciousness.
So would you say... Sorry, go ahead.
It's been very educational for me to become immersed, because the first year and a half, we were immersed in PTSD and spending time with vets who have been diagnosed with PTSD.
So prior to the film, you worked with not necessarily veterans, but people with PTSD. I'm sure a lot of the public knows that PTSD is sometimes very frequent in combat soldiers and servicemen of different areas. But what other occupations or events could cause PTSD?
Really, any severe trauma. The classic ones are, of course, first responders, such as firemen and cops, rape victims, victims of abuse. Those are the severe ones that are identified. But if you look down another layer, you find deep trauma, which causes post-traumatic stress in many populations. But we chose to focus on the vets, partly because it was near and dear to our hearts. I myself grew up in a military family. I was raised around the world on military bases. Of course, my father was in the military, served in World War II and Korea. So I have some up-close personal experience.
Is there a big difference that you see in symptoms for combat veterans and other people that you've worked with?
Just to be clear and to be honest, I did not have a specialty of working with PTSD, so I can't claim to be an expert clinician in that arena.
Okay.
But I can tell you from observation that, of course, combat vets have some very dramatic stories that break our hearts. But I would say that PTSD at its core is similar for anybody who suffers from deep trauma.
And do you believe that these methods that you've mentioned from the film that you followed, are they much more beneficial than traditional prescription medication from what you've seen?
From what we have seen, and of course we've talked to veterans who have already decided in the beginning that to get off of pharmaceuticals because they themselves experienced how it made them feel. I'm sure you've heard this before, but given 10 to 15 to 20 medications often turns these men and women into zombies who are suicidal, overweight, impotent. It becomes a prison of its own. So the vets that we've encountered had already decided to use cannabis as an alternative. And then a subset of those people decided to go even further rather than use it for symptom management to actually move towards a transformation of consciousness and deep healing. But to answer your question, absolutely. The stories, I mean, just to start with cannabis, if I've heard it once, I've heard it 50 times. The experience of some of these vets who perhaps for years were isolated, living in their own prison, besieged by nightmares, not being able to sleep, and with their first experience of cannabis, finding a tremendous relief, ability to sleep almost immediately. So those stories are dramatic, for sure. And I have every confidence that the right strain of marijuana for each individual can be of great medical benefit. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The only thing now is getting more research done to show that and to match up particular individuals with the strains that are best for them.
Some of the veterans I've spoken to that are in United States, they tell me how expensive getting their medical marijuana is. They don't get any coverage, and fortunately up here in Canada, veterans are getting some coverage. They were initially getting 10 grams a day reimbursed. Now they're getting 3 grams a day. These, of course, veterans who have qualified for the program. What's your take on that? That from what you've seen, the expense that soldiers need to pay to get something that they believe is better for them than the prescription medication.
Well, first, let me say that we spent quite a bit of time in Canada, Luke being Canadian, and our great good fortune to have met Fabian Henry, who with Marijuana for Trauma, who has done a great service to thousands of veterans to teach them about the use of cannabis for PTSD and also how to get their benefits in Canada to pay for it. So what we see in Canada is a much more integrated approach. There's more ease about it. There's an ability to move to other levels, not only getting cannabis, but then moving to meditation and mindfulness and art therapy and to move deeper into that space. Whereas in the United States, it's sometimes we've been at for instance, at Santa Cruz Veterans Alliance, where they every 2 weeks give out small amounts of marijuana. And it's really heartbreaking to see veterans coming for just a small amount because it is so expensive. Even in states where medical marijuana is available with a referral, a recommendation. But then there's the further problem of states that don't even allow it. And so that it really is gosh, what's the word? It's just devastating to see this and to know that there's something out there that could really help. And yet the expense or your zip code can prevent you from accessing it. Yet pharmaceuticals are given freely to our veterans through the VA. So this is one of the points of our movie, or one of the hope for outcomes, is that people will get educated in that and not be afraid of marijuana and cannabis as, just stoners sitting around eating potato chips all day. That's far, far from the truth. What we see is cannabis makes veterans able to function better, to be more compassionate, to have more ability to regulate themselves and control their reactions. So this is the great hope, and yet we need to be doing the research, which Sue Sisley has been attempting for years and has, been blocked at many turns for a variety of reasons. But we all agree we need more research. There's some good research actually going on in Canada with Philippe Lucas at Tilray. Tilray is a commercial company, but by everything I can ascertain, they have done a good job of staying out of, trying to cook the results. They really seem to support the researchers. So There's signs of hope. Israel also is doing good research.
Yeah, I've spoken with Patrick Seifert about Sue Sisley, and he was telling me that one of the ways she's been blocked was she's not getting quality medical marijuana to do proper research. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yes, it's a travesty. Right now, any FDA, Federal Drug Administration programs, which is how you go through the proper channels, any FDA approved trials have to use federally supplied cannabis. And there's only one place where you can get it, and that's the University of Mississippi. And unfortunately, both the quality is low, the THC levels are not what they need, and this is, it's just an indirect block. We're hoping that pretty soon they'll allow other people to grow the proper strains.
If you know the answer to this question, it'd be great. Do you know roughly the percentage of THC veterans need to combat their symptoms, or the lowest it could be?
I don't know that. Someone like Matt Kale would tell you. First of all, it's not just THC and CBD. I mean, that much I have heard from the experts, but I'm by no means an expert in the medical use of marijuana. But I do know from Fabian that different people need different strains, and that's part of what has to happen is help people find which strain works best for them with their particular symptoms and their physiology and their brain. It can be highly individual.
And in your experience, what other methods have you suggested or seen veterans using to deal with their stress? Maybe not medicinal marijuana, but what else have you noticed?
You mean other than the very, like the psychedelics,
And
or are you talking about more managing of symptoms like meditation and yoga and that type of thing, or are you talking about the further ayahuasca and MDMA?
Managing the symptoms, but I definitely want to get into the ayahuasca as well. I'm very interested in hearing about that.
Well, there's some great technologies that work for quite a few people. The EMDR, which is approved by the VA, cognitive-based therapies work for a lot of people. Even exposure therapy, which doesn't sound pleasant to me, but works for some people. So we are not throwing, nobody in their right mind would throw those out because they really help some people. It's just that for treatment resistant people, ones who have tried all these therapies, including the pharmaceuticals, and have not gotten the relief they seek, then sometimes it calls for further investigation and experimentation, and that leads to the psychedelics.
And I have no experience with ayahuasca, so do you mind telling me a little bit about that? Because I'm quite interested. I've heard a few stories from a couple veterans, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about it.
Well, ayahuasca is a brew from the Amazon basin, from Peru. It's been used for at least hundreds of years, perhaps thousands, but that has traditionally been used by shamans to do vision quests and to help them heal other people. In the last 40 years, it's coming out of the jungle, or at least coming out of just that cultural context, and more people are experimenting with it. Not only veterans, not only people with PTSD, but there's a wide range of people who are experimenting with it. And finding insight, finding healing, finding a resetting of their brain in a way, and a release of trauma that then allows them to function at much higher levels and ultimately with more joy. So that's the potential. No, I don't believe it works for everybody in that way, but it certainly merits looking into.
And how do people use it?
It's done ceremonially. both MDMA and ayahuasca, I want to emphasize, need to be done in a safe setting with professionals who know what they're doing. Ayahuasca certainly is not a party drug. It's not pleasant. It takes people deep into their psyche. So it needs to be done in a context, a ceremony, or with somebody who is well versed in how to help somebody feel safe and move through some of their terrors and traumas in a productive way. So our movie advocates the I want to say proper context and dosage of these materials. And MDMA is used in clinical settings with two therapists, a male and a female. Excuse me. So, context means a lot, if you know what I mean. But when done responsibly, we've seen tremendous results. And that's what the movie's about. Excuse me, I'm going to get some water here.
Oh, no, take your time.
Okay, I'm back.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Does your film record these ceremonies going on?
It certainly does. We have the before, so we contacted the veterans that are our main characters while they were still immersed in their PTSD, filming them with their families and in their daily lives. Then we accompany them to their ceremonies, stayed with them through all of that, and then we see them afterwards. In July, it'll be almost a year and 3 months. So you see it over time, longitudinally.
And when they go in, do you notice a big difference as soon as they come out in their demeanor and their emotions at the time?
Absolutely.
It's just
Absolutely.
like night and day.
It's very powerful transformation in a short period of time. Now, that said, it does require work afterwards. It's not a magic bullet that takes everything away. One brings up material that then has to be integrated, understood. Certainly when they come home to their families after these experiences, their families not having known them with PTSD for 3, 4, 5 years, it's a big shift. So that causes ripples in the family, for sure. So it's a beginning. It's a powerful beginning and gives a glimpse into a transformed state. But it needs to be fed, nurtured, integrated, and kept alive. So support afterwards is a good thing to do.
Do a lot of these veterans seek counseling from psychologists or?
Well, interestingly, even though I encourage them to, no, they don't. But what they do is, and this seems to work very well, is seek the support of each other. True to form, veterans are warriors, and there's a sense of wanting to do it on their own. And in the cases that we've seen, very often they rely on one another, and that's a powerful bond. And a big part of the healing is finally having people, a tribe again, that they can relate to and talk to and be silly with and be vulnerable with, etc. I don't know if you've read Sebastian Junger's book Tribe, but he talks about that bonding that goes on, and that's a big part of the trauma is coming home, and they don't, veterans then are left isolated in their own basements in their homes. So I would say that the ongoing support is best supplied by other veterans and psychologists and meditation teachers, etc. All of those things become beneficial.
I know in various states there's veteran organizations. Can you do you want to shout out to a couple that you've encountered?
Yes, one of the really great ones, and it doesn't have anything to do with cannabis nor psychedelics, but songwriting with soldiers, which puts on retreats for veterans and active duty personnel, where they go through a weekend of yoga meditation and are paired with a songwriter where they tell their story and it ends up in a song. So that to me is one that's very powerful and an example of something that works other than the psychedelics. Um, I have great respect for Fabian Henry's program, Marijuana for Trauma, which provides ongoing support and a place to gather for the veterans. I mean, to me, that's one of the stellar examples is Marijuana for Trauma. And then there's Weed for Warriors, which also provides camaraderie and places to gather periodically. So there's several. And then, of course, there's some classic ones, but we're not in touch with those so much. But there's a lot of good organizations out there for veterans.
I've spoken to a lot of them there. It's quite amazing that they're coming together, they're taking the initiative, and they're helping they're helping each other out, and it's great to see.
Yes, it really is. And you know, veterans are warriors. They're leaders. You've probably heard this quote by Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a famous Buddhist meditation teacher who himself was from Vietnam and imprisoned and beaten. And he himself says, veterans are the tip of the candle. They're the ones who will show us the light. They've been to war, but it's they who, through their own transformation, and I'm paraphrasing here, can show us the way to resolve conflict without war and violence. So, to me, the veterans are a great hope for our country. All of that intelligence, power, force, and determination can really help lead us in new directions. And it's happening. That's what we see. It is happening.
And Weed for Warriors, are they across United States, or are they in certain states?
It started in California, but they have chapters in many states. I couldn't give you the exact list, but I'm sure if you go to their website, Weed for Warriors, you can find gatherings. And certainly in Canada, Marijuana for Trauma, they have centers all over Canada. I think they have 15 centers, actual physical centers.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
where veterans can come and gather during the day and be with each other. It really becomes a tribe.
Have you come across any veterans who use service dogs to help with their symptoms?
Yes, one of our well, first of all, most of the veterans that we encounter have dogs and have close relationships with their dogs. Michael Cooley, who's one of the main characters in our film, was a dog handler in Iraq. And he now has a service dog that he's been training post ayahuasca.
Post ayahuasca.
Post ayahuasca.
So
He has had dogs before that. They play an important role for him, but his new dog is named ayahuasca. Aya.
yeah.
Aya.
So is that part of the support that you mentioned that most veterans should take after ayahuasca? Is the like a service dog could be part of that support?
I think it's a great support. I encourage each veteran to find what works best for them, and there's hundreds of paths of finding support. But to me, having a service dog is a great emotional support that's nonverbal but very present and dedicated. So, I mean, I think it's a great thing. but not everybody is equipped to train a dog and have a dog in their life. But certainly I advocate it.
Well, I personally can't wait to see your film Shock and Awe, and I sounds amazing. I can't wait. Like it took 3 years, you said, to film that entire thing.
Yes, it was over 3 years ago when we started. Of course, part of it is gaining the confidence of the vets because as non vets, you can't just step in and say, let us film you. You have to earn it. You have to earn their respect and confidence that, that they can trust us with their story. So that was a big part of it in the beginning was developing relationships that were authentic. And I can safely say we've made some dear friends. Dear friends. I have tremendous respect. Tremendous respect.
And people could sign up for the newsletter on from shockdaw.com.
Yes, not yes. Sign up for the newsletter. There's also interviews by experts. If anybody wants to do a little research, you can see the. You can check out some of the experts talking about it. You can see some of the stories, just the written stories of some of our veterans who are featured in the film, and some other resources. I encourage everybody to go there. And of course, to donate if they want to. We're still in production. We're still in post production. So we, any of those things. But mostly, we want people to see it when it is out because we believe it can move the hearts and minds of those who might be skeptical about cannabis, ayahuasca, and MDMA.
Well,
Let them see for themselves.
well, that is an interesting question. Have you noticed any negatives to medical marijuana when they use them, or the other two that you mentioned?
Negative effects.
Like on their health, or is anything negative that comes out of them, like prescription medication? There's a long list of side effects. Have you?
Right. Um, Certainly there must be some, but for me, the overwhelming benefit, when used responsibly again, is it's the benefits. I can't think of negative consequences that I have personally seen. I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm sure some people can become over dependent, but I think it's much rarer than the skeptics might think. Um, Basically, it allows our veterans to return to society and become functioning again, highly functioning.
With everyone I've talked to, I haven't heard a single negative effect as of yet. Um,
Yes.
I'm sure there'll be a lot more research done, and we'll have to wait and see what that leads to.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's why we want to do the research, to make sure that this isn't just all anecdotal, that we're not just hearing from the ones who got benefit. I have heard stories, I haven't met any, but certain strains of cannabis can actually activate and make hypervigilant people with PTSD and others. So those strains need to be avoided. But that's why education is important. That's why you need your buddies to help coach you on this. Marijuana for Trauma actually assigns a cannabis coach to each vet that comes in to help them titrate and get onto the right strain. Titrate meaning, finding the right dosage, starting small and moving in because you don't want to evoke another, panic attack. So, there's caution, but the benefits are that I have observed are overwhelmingly positive.
Well, Janine, I want to thank you for coming on the show today and taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you got lots going on, and I thank you again for coming on.
Thank you.
And
It's been a pleasure. And thank you for getting the word out.
doing my best. We'd love to have you back on when your movie comes out, and we could have another podcast talk about it, and maybe more people will hear it that way of where they can see it, and when it's out?
Yeah, great. Yeah, once it's out, then we'll be putting the word out. It's like go here, see it. Here's because then it's a matter of really getting the word out.
So they either can sign up for the newsletter or wait to hear the next episode with you.
Yes, or go to our Facebook page or our Twitter account from Shock to Awe. That we post daily on both of those, the Twitter and the Facebook. So you get both current articles, research, uh, people profiles, etc. So that's another resource, and certainly any updates about our film will be there as well.
All right, I'm gonna sign up.
Good. Thank you, Jesse.
Well, until next time, it was great talking to you.
Thank you.
All right, this has been the Vapes for Vets podcast brought to you by Namaste Technologies. Tune in next time.